Hey folks, Steve here with another Axis Empires Ultimate Edition video for you today. This is going to be the really part one, or the beginning of our Divine Win 1944 campaign with Schiffskrieg. I apologize for the delay. It's been a couple weeks since the last video where I did sort of the part zero introduction. One week I wasn't feeling particularly good for several days, and I just couldn't build up the wherewithal to play and record and talk through all the things that would need to be talked through. I just couldn't. I just didn't have the energy to do that. And this past week, just really busy, kind of catching up on other stuff and uh, work and all that sort of stuff. That's really taken up my brain time. So um, there is that. So sorry about that. Sorry for the delay. I really would have preferred to just kept on rolling because I think before I had really good momentum built up. I was cranking out videos. We were doing well there. The rules are fresh in my mind, or were fresh in my mind. The Schiff's Creek stuff I was absorbing. I'm having to come back at it now a couple weeks of just not looking at it at all, which could slow me down. But I'm going to try to keep that off camera and let you guys just see the aftermath of the actual play. We'll probably pop in and show particular naval engagements just to kind of show how all that runs. If you've not really had a chance to see that, though, I do expect that we're only going to have so many of those because the Japanese fleet at some point is just going to be so torn up that there's not going to be much that they can do to really contest the the Allied movements. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah. So we're without much more preamble. I should say, just notify. Yes, there are several units, ships, variety of things on the turn track that will come in. There are several units that are on the shipbuilding track that will also come in, and I'm managing those two, or I'm managing these Schiffskrieg player aids sort of over there on the other side of the table. And I'm realizing, if I'm gonna do a full game, like a full campaign of Axis Empires Ultimate Edition with East map, not East map, geez, European map and the Dicenso map. I'm gonna have to do some rearranging of my table situation to make all that work. But I'm not gonna worry about that right now. So we're gonna jump into things. I had to make a little note for myself just to help remind when certain things are done. So um, uh, during seasonal turns, we have our naval construction step. We also have an Axis commerce raid step that happens after naval construction. So sort of the last thing that you do on the seasonal phase before you do your political events segment. So I've got a note there, and then a reminder on this little sticky note that the additional Schiff's Krieg activities, namely base attacks, which um, you're focused on attacking a specific geographic location with a raid force, a raid task force, and the sub patrols, which is sending your subs out to do particular types of activities. Those are done during the support segment. So they're done alongside all of our other support segment stuff whenever we choose to do the thing that we want to do there. I'm not sure if it's going to make more sense to do, like in my head, I think it would be beneficial to do those two things. Um, Maybe before you do anything else, like I feel like if I did a base attack, that would be very useful to go do before I place any other markers because maybe I get off a base attack and I manage to sink or damage or whatever enemy carriers. And now when I place my carrier fleet marker, they're not going to be able to contest it with a CV fleet marker themselves. They're not going to have carriers to contest. So it feels like doing base attacks and sub patrols and those types of things I would want to do maybe before I do any other marker placement. Just see what we can get out of those activities and then do the rest because those things could help us do other support marker placement. Now, if you're familiar with the game and the system, and you've played Shifts Creek before, and you're watching this, and I feel like the Shifts Creek's new, so there's not like a bank of veteran Shifts Creek players at this point. The game's only been out so long. I don't know how many are out there. Let me know how you're doing it. If you are playing this, and maybe you're watching this video long after it was published, that's okay. Still leave a comment, even years later, if need be. I'm curious to see just where do people feel like it is most advantageous, because I'm used to, I guess, in like, okay, again, comparing World and Flames, like you do port attacks, which are generally close to the same thing, um, if not exactly the same thing, but somewhat similar. Um, those are like the first things you do in a turn. So in my head, I'm like, well, the earlier I push this activity, I feel like the better off I'll be, because I'm going to get some free shots on somebody. Now, just talk very briefly about how a base attack works, which I'm probably going to use more than the sub patrols. Um, Basically, you say, "Hey, I'm going to do one." You need to have a support unit, either an Air Force, a bomber, or a CV strike. Uh, oh, okay. All right. Now why I don't even need to ask the question. See, now I'm rusty, guys. I took 2 weeks off and I'm rusty. You can do a base attack with a CV strike, um, support unit in its force pool. I wonder, is that literally a CV fleet or is that a CV strike? Because that there's a difference in between CV strike and just a CV fleet marker, and that could be the tricky part here. But just to talk through it, you don't spend the support unit; you just have to have the marker available. So that's kind of a freebie type of thing. You form a raid task force. They're going to tend to not be very big, and then you're going to place those guys in a port hex that contains enemy ships or land-based air within a naval sea zone that meets your range restrictions. You may need to make speed checks, and then you're going to roll on a base attack table. Now, typically, there are not DRMs for this, die roll modifiers, except for if you're using, you actually are using a full uh, support marker placement. So again, just a regular brief attack raid, you don't use the marker, you just go execute it. If you're going to do what's called a sustained base attack, it means you're actually going to place, I mean, let's talk about this for a second. Like you're going to place the marker on the location like that. If you're going to do that, then that's considered a sustained attack, and there are some DRMs associated with it. But keep in mind that that uses a whole marker, right? So the marker goes to the delay box. Your planes may not be usable for a little while. You're sustaining it, meaning you're expending a lot more resources to go do this thing that you're going to do. Now, if it's a sustained attack, you get a -2 to the die roll on the base attack table, which is good. And you can get a -1 if it's a carrier strike unit in the hex. So again, if you're using the actual support markers, CV fleet turn into a CV strike, or an Air Force or bomber unit in the hex, you can get either a -1 or a -2. Land-based air is better, so Air Force and bombers get you the -2, carriers the -1, and then you roll on the base attack table, and you can see the results. So you want to roll low. So getting a -2 will certainly help a whole lot, and it will keep you from getting Raiders discovered. Raiders discovered, just to summarize that very quickly, just means like your Raiders are going to maybe get hurt or have trouble. Target away is no result, so nothing happens. You basically just use those ships and planes for maybe nothing. And then the actual air raid, you get 1 combat round or 2 combat rounds. The most significant thing about the combat rounds is the enemy doesn't hit you back. So you can imagine for a second, like, let's say we caught some American carrier, like for the Japanese, they would love to do this, but they're probably not going to be able to. Let's say, we've got a whole bunch of aircraft carriers sitting in these ports around the Pacific, let's say the Japanese got really lucky. They did a little raid fleet, and they used a carrier for it, and they stuck out, a couple of their rare carriers at this point in the game. They get to take some free pot shots at enemy carriers potentially, and if they did that, basically hurting the American carrier force without worrying about their own losses. That's a great idea. Japanese at this point in the campaign, in the grand campaign narrative here, probably can't afford to do a base attack. They don't have enough ships to really use them that way, and then maybe not have access to those ships. But the Americans, on the other hand, are much more likely to get to do this. They've got excess, so they can send a few carriers out on a raid attack, maybe try to catch some Japanese ships out of sorts, and then um, just kind of win the battle of attrition over time. And I have found that the Ship's Creek battle system can be a bit attritional. Like, there's no way you're not going to have damaged ships when you have a contested combat. Like, somebody's going to get hurt. At this point, the Americans are going to win out on that. They just have so many more ships than the Japanese at this point, that it's going to be really hard to see. Unless the Japanese get very, very, very lucky, it's going to be really hard to see how they can tip those scales. Um, so that's the idea there. All right, so let's move a bit further along here, and talk about the Japanese first turn. We still need to play the the actual turn. Let's start getting through it. Okay, now since we are in a seasonal turn, it's May, June, summer 1944. We're going to play our pending card, which is determined by us by the scenario information, and we'll pick sort of the next card that will be in autumn. So the game has selected for us Imperial Directive Naval Project. So Japan struggles to complete the armored carrier Shinano and other special naval projects. So we're going to have the Navy leading the government. I think that was already the case. It was. We're going to get one infantry step, and then when we get to our political event segment, we're going to roll. So then we're going to have to pick our pending card. I'm just using, and I'm really glad that this is included in the game. The historical card is the Shogo Defense Plan, which is the Japan begins suicidal kamikaze attacks. Um, well, we are playing the Divine Wind campaign. That is appropriate. So, strategic warfare box, we would have the kamikazes card, some more replacements, and a loss of our government marker. So, or at least I think that's what that is. Is it in the holding box? I think that's the holding box. So, anyway, we're gonna have to play this, or we're gonna play this next one, and we'll see what benefits that brings. I've got the cards set over to the side, so we'll worry about that. Um, just the same. Now, if somebody's got an idea of what would be a better card pick than the historical option, hey, let me know. But I feel like I do think in terms of this game system, like the cards, I've been mostly on the historical rails, just seeing how all these things work together. In a big, like, okay, grand campaign where I'm starting from 37, I might be more willing to make some different decisions, but I know that one of the pitfalls of that is to make some pretty awful card mistakes, like not playing a card in time to play another important card, and you really need to actually probably sit down and think about your card strategy for the life of the war, and have a pretty good idea what you want to do. And I haven't quite progressed to that point. Someday I will. Okay, so option card segment, we've done that. Logistics, I don't think there's much for us to do logistics wise because of the setup just being done, and we get our replacements. Now, I'm a little unsure what to do with this single step. But I can very easily just get something to defend the home islands. So we'll start to do that, I guess. Or we'll get something into Tokyo, maybe, and that's gotta we gotta start doing that as well. I should point out. So, um, the the Allies, if they want to take a lot of strategic hexes from Japan, well, there's a whole boatload of them in Japan itself, so we can't leave our neck hanging out too badly. Now, I do think there's some possible penalties for invading the home islands. I need to look up this special rule, but just something to keep in mind that like I don't want to leave Japan completely empty. And if the island hopping campaign of the Allies is very successful, I might have to worry about fighting in Japan itself, and that could be quite bad news for the Japanese. So we'll put our replacement unit there, and now we're going to have our naval construction segment. Now, I don't think there's a whole lot for us to do here because the let's see, it's not the political event segment yet, so um, it's really a question of do we have any shipbuilding capability this late in the war? I'm thinking we don't. Um, but I need to see here. So page 17. Let's see, this late in the game, Japan. Okay, pre-war and Pacific Limited War. So once you're at total war, the Japanese, as best as I can tell, um, can't begin construction of any new ships. And in fact, I don't see any other ships on the shipbuilding track at this point. So I think we're going to have to hope for a good die roll on our card that may allow us to get a ship or something put on the track. I'm not 100% sure of that. But yeah, so much for that. Yeah, I don't think there's any ships on the way area. So that was easy. We'll move on. Now the question is, do we want to do any commerce rating? I don't know that we have the ships to spare for it, to be honest. Nor do I think there's. I mean, I'm going to choose not to here. Now this might be an opportune time to try, but I don't see where I could really pull it off. If I look at what it would take, so it's worth talking about, right? Because this is one of the added features of Schiffskrieg. Um, we would form a raid task force by selecting up to two ships. Ships must be Japanese, and the port must border the Bay of Bengal. Oh, they have to be based in the same port. Okay. So we'd be doing this based in the Bay of Bengal or the West Indian Nation naval zones. Um, a Japanese heavy ship cannot be part of a raid task force, and an Axis faction can form a raid task force only when the Navy is not leading the government, but right now the Navy is leading the government, and or the material shortages marker is in the strategic warfare box. Well, it's not in the strategic warfare box. So, case in point, we can't do a commerce raid, so we're going to move along. So now we have our political event segment. So again, this is our opportunity to roll here. Now the DRMs, right now, Axis Tide is 2 victory points, so it's going to be a +2. However, the U.S. commitment level um, does a -2, so this is just going to be a straight die roll. I think the Japanese would maybe want a naval projects production success, but let's roll a die and find out. All right, so we got a 3. So we're going to roll instead on the Bushido table. So I guess not what we would have wanted, to be honest. I think we would have liked to have gotten a naval project success. So now we're going to roll on the Bushido table, which is on the play raid card. Again, this is going to be a flat die roll. We rolled another 3, so now we have a cabinet crisis. Oh boy. And we're going to roll again. And we rolled a 6. Oh, geez. Allies support resistance. That's not good. That's going to mean partisans. I'm reasonably confident. So let me take care of that, and we'll show the aftermath of that because that might matter a whole lot of what we do. Okay, so we the Yeah, geez, what rotten luck. Ally support resistance, which was basically going to allow us to either start a partisan base, and boy, that felt like it was going to be a good idea. Um, However, we had a couple of ideas. So one, the Western factions got the pick. Not that it really matters here, because if it was the Soviets, probably not a whole lot would be too different. Um, but it was either get a partisan base, or it was going to be remove a detachment marker. And we were able to select a location that was either not an island, and in the glossary, an island is a one hex island. We could remove a detachment. We could not remove a detachment marker if it was in an island hex. Um, but we could remove a detachment marker of the Japanese from Balikpapan, or Balikpapan. I always struggle with that one with the consonants. Um, because it qualified. So we removed that guy, and now the Japanese no longer have control of that strategic hex. Now, here's the rub. Here's why that was important. One, that now knocks the Japanese. That's at the end of the turn anyway, or at the next seasonal turn. The Japanese will already be knocked down a strategic hex. So important. Um, the other nice thing is it provides uh, some, well, and I should say, the Netherlands East Indies is not, I don't believe is reactivated yet, but I couldn't get rid of any other. There weren't that many like open aha places, but that will help us because they don't control it, and it would be easier for us to use as a base later on. So just chipping away at their strategic hex. This was a freebie. Um, I'll take a freebie, even if it doesn't allow the Dutch East Indies to be reactivated or to come back, because this is a NEI dependent Borneo, not the actual uh, main areas of the Netherlands East Indies. It's still a pickup. It's a pickup that gives us a strategic hex shift because the Japanese actually have to occupy that hex with a detachment marker or a unit. Now, if the Japanese wanted to, in response to losing it, they could try to siphon off resources to go take it back. But to be honest, to try to expend those resources, I don't think is a very good idea. Um, Generally speaking, I don't think it's a good idea. So that's going to be something that now the Japanese have to worry about. They have to say, well, do we try to do anything about that? I'm thinking no. If you look at the map, it's kind of hard to tell because it's so zoomed out for you folks watching. The Japanese are spread pretty thin. Like they don't have a lot of options. Any sort of naval landing they would try to do right now would require um, a very specific commitment of resources to retake ground. And I do not see that being a very convincing thing that they can do this late in the game. Um, they could try to get into Borneo. They'd have to take a unit, ship a unit out, maybe take that unit that's out of that we just put in Japan, and try to figure out a way to get them shipped all the way over to Balikpapan, and it would probably use up most of their scratch convoys trying to take it back. So I've got to think about, is it even worth trying to do that at this point? I'm not necessarily sure that it is. Uh, but now I also need to start thinking about what support marker stuff will the Japanese do, because it is their turn. I do see it maybe worthwhile to launch a base attack here at Trincomalee, where the British um, fleet is currently based. It's a worthwhile shot to try to get over there and make something happen. I kind of maybe want to try it just to see if it'll work. It'll if the Japanese fail, it would be a pretty bad pretty bad set of circumstances. So I don't know. I'm not sure how I want to do that. But let me take some time to think it through. Losing Borneo like that is like what rotten luck, because we were hoping to get a naval project success. That was really the whole idea, and instead it went to Bushido, and then it went to a rotten failure. So really, really not good for the Japanese. Right out of the gate, we're getting kicked in the shins. Not great. Okay, the last clip, part of this video that you watched, was recorded like 3 weeks before this one. But I just will point out that right now, technically, if we were at the end of the game, Japan would still get credit for this due to the priority 3 control, because Borneo as a NEI dependent is still it is a dependent based on the conquered state of the NEI. Right now, the NEI is still conquered, um, and so technically, at the end, right now, Japan would control that strategic objective. So we don't the removal of the detachment marker is not good. It's not immediately bad. However, should the Allies make it into Surabaya, Batavia, Palembang, and basically have the NEI stop being fully conquered and becomes, active once again, I believe that this would then have Balikpapan flip, unless the Japanese were to get another unit in here. So the net effect of the national, the Allies supporting the rebels there, with that political event, is the Allies aren't going to need to dig out the detachment or land there. So it's still basically saving the Allies a beachhead placement. It's saving them units that they're going to have to send to Borneo. They basically can get away with not worrying about it at this point, so long as they take one of these hexes. And obviously, Batavia being probably the most advantageous to get, because that's yet another strategic hex, and the main capital of NEI. So it doesn't totally deprive the Japanese of a strategic hex, but it does put one basically within much better reach for the Allies, where they don't have to do a widespread campaign in the NEI region. They can kind of focus on Batavia. They don't need to send off an extra set of British or American troops to Borneo necessarily. And again, I don't know that the Japanese really have very many options to stick somebody in there right now. So um, that's kind of the situation at the moment. So lots to consider there. In terms of the rest of the turn, I still haven't quite done a lot. I had to take a couple of weeks off. Just too much going on with life, and I just couldn't get pulled away to play more. I don't know that the Japanese can really do much. We're probably going to see some attacking in India and China. Naval air wise, like, I don't think there's much we can really do. I think at best what we could expect to achieve is um, just holding and waiting for the Allied response, and hope that we get good intelligence die rolls and we get really lucky in naval combats. I really don't see this scenario as being one that the Japanese are going to get some upset victories. The weight of numbers is so against them in terms of naval air power that there's just no reasonable expectation that the Japanese can get some upsets and somehow flip the script. It's way beyond that. So we're just going to have to treat this as fight tooth and nail and make it as costly as possible for the Americans. That's what the Japanese can do. Okay, well, here we are. We'll say it's after the Axis faction's turn. I didn't do a whole lot, to be honest. Some of this maybe is just connected to my feeling of like analysis paralysis, like what can Japan do? Especially in 1944. I mean, I guess this is just part of the story, right? Any World War II game, honestly, this is the way World War II works. The Axis kind of has their day, and they get out to their point, and then they're on the defensive. And we can look for different counterpunch moves, but right now, at the beginning of this scenario, 1944, Japan's really kind of out of gas to do any moves on the offensive. I did choose, and this might turn out to come back and bite me because of how I did it. I did a base attack on the British port, and I was surprised it happened. I got lucky, so the Japanese can be happy with that. I sent a light carrier and a carrier against the fleet here in Trincomalee, and we succeeded in getting one round of combat. Could have gotten two. That would have been much better. And we did sink the British carrier, the Illustrious, which was really a good pickup. Which kind of means that we've effectively removed the British ability to use their CV marker, as that was their only carrier ship on map. Now, I think eventually the Allies do have some shipbuilding reinforcements coming in, so the British may get more carriers. The one problem with that is now, at least for the rest of the turn, this Japanese force stationed at um, Singapore don't have a carrier complement because the carriers are now in the used box of the Bay of Bengal. So um, I, I don't feel too bad with that because one, the Japanese right now seem to only have one CV strike marker, or I'm sorry, one CV fleet marker as a support unit, and I think I want to keep that uh, for a counterpunch token placement with the Japanese elsewhere. So if there's a basically we reduce the British ability with that. I'm happy with that for the moment. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have trouble later because of we basically used up those two carriers for the time being. But a nice little sneak attack. I wasn't willing to do that anywhere else just because again like we need to expect to do damage to the Allies in actual combat at this point. If we had gotten lucky on any of the American ports or something within range, and maybe we did an air attack, we maybe could have pinged a few carriers. But if we would have pinged a few carriers, it wouldn't really have shifted the numbers in terms of markers or anything else because again, the Americans have so many carriers, they have so many markers. Here, at least, we basically nullified one of the Allied support markers, and we did that more or less for free in my accounting. So I don't know if that's really the best move there, but kind of figured out a way. I didn't have to spend a marker. I did a base attack, which is one of the special activities in Schiff's Krieg. I didn't have to spend a marker, which is important. And I've nullified an allied marker, which may slow down the Allies' progress in the Bay of Bengal theater, especially, I mean, one, just supporting the Allied attacks in Burma and whatever actions may go along in the Netherlands, East Indies. There's now increased pressure to protect Batavia because we don't want to lose out on Borneo. Or control of Borneo, which is now very much at risk without our detachment there, and really limited capability to try to plop another detachment marker in there at this point. I did try some attacks in China, one of which went not great, or it went okay. It went, two others went okay. So we sort of forced some losses in the south. We kind of had a uh, kind of an iffy result right there at the tip of my finger, where we forced the Chinese to move, but we haven't really made much progress. We lost a step, and then uh, in the very far north, we pushed the communists back for the loss of a step. Really, probably not worth it, all things considered. So, at this point, I feel like maybe I should have just held the line in China. Trying to push a little bit probably isn't going to get us very far or do much good. We still maybe will get lucky and get in a Chungking if we really try to push there. But I kind of feel like that's not the best use of our remaining manpower. I don't know. If we did, I will say this much: if we did get into Szechuan and we got into Chungking and we knocked them out, that would relieve a lot of pressure on the board. We could then swing west into Yunnan and try to back up Burma or continue pressure on the Chinese. I don't know if that would really shift the game much, but it might allow us to shift other units to the north because as soon as the Russians come in, our weak Manchukuo forces are just going to disintegrate. I mean, I'm looking up there at the math, and unless I try to reinforce the front with Russia, it's going to go downhill pretty quick. So really tough for the Japanese. Obviously, it's 1944. That's the way it's supposed to be. I'm going to switch over to the Allied turn and just try to play through this. I think this video is going to be a bit long. Some of it just because I'm returning to the game. Like I recorded a couple of segments of this video and then I took 3 weeks off to take care of life stuff, and I'm kind of trying to get my brain back in this mode. Um, but we're going to get through like the first turn in this video, which will be long, and then in future videos I'll probably play more in an abbreviated format, except where we have like true naval battles. I'll want to show that for Schiff's Creek purposes. But let's mount this over to the Western Allied turn, and check their cards out. I don't think there's much more to show for the Japanese. I guess I should double check if there's any conditional events. I don't think there are. Allied minor country conquest, no. Axis minor country occupation, no. Manchukuo garrison check. I would have to believe that that's valid. I'll double check that. British neutrality pact doesn't matter. Internment, no. Shipyard loss. I don't think that's relevant at the moment. So, yeah. All right. I'm going to do a quick cut here. We'll be shifting over to talk about the Allied option card that they'll be playing, and go from there. Okay, so Western Allied side. It now needing to adjust my brain a little bit. Well, this should be the more fun faction to be playing in this scenario, obviously, where the Japanese are trying to hold on for dear life. The Allies have so much more capability um, in terms of options, because we have a lot more forces at our disposal, but we're on the time pressure. So we need to be efficient, and we need to basically cause the collapse of the Japanese Empire, reclaim the Philippines, the Dutch East Indies, Burma if we can, and many of the important strategic islands in the Pacific, and more, to try to get um, that shift of strategic hexes, all the way in our favor. And and historically speaking, it was a tie, which means an Axis victory in game terms, overall global war, Allied victory, obviously. So even with all the advantages stacked against us, the limitation is not can we defeat the Japanese, it's can we defeat the Japanese in all the places that we need to defeat them in a fast enough sequence to get to where we want to be. So that's on us to figure out. I'm gonna not feel too bad if we get the historical result, I guess, particularly with using Chef's Krieg, which is a whole new monster. Let's talk about cards, because obviously the very first thing we need to start thinking about is the cards. Now, again, I'm going to be somewhat reliant on the historical narrative here to just kind of have an idea of what we should be using. The card that is to be used, or that must be used on this first go, is Operation Forger, which is the campaign to reconquer Guam and Saipan, which kind of gives us a good idea of what to focus on for these next 3 turns of the summer. So if we look at that, so Guam and Saipan are here. Now, historically, Truk was bypassed, I think, but the Allies did eventually get into Rabaul again. I think they did. So I think we want to get into Rabaul if we can. I think we want to get into Guam and Saipan if we can. So those provide nice, obvious places to focus on. And when we look at what does that mean for us, well, we're going to get a POA logistics marker in our force pool, which is great. We're going to get some additional stuff in our delay box. So the USN superiority marker, which is basically a cheater marker, right? Like I hate to say it, this feels a little kludgy, that the USN superiority marker is just a thing that comes in the game, and then the US just does better with naval stuff. I kind of don't like that. That's even a thing that to have. Like, I don't know. That feels a little kludgy. But that'll go into the delay box. We'll get some units. We'll get another service squadron Oh, we already have one on the board. I have to go look. Like, I think there can only be one on the board, so maybe we'll have an extra in case something happens. I don't know. I'm gonna have to double check that. We'll get some additional steps. The British are certainly in need of some steps, especially if they're going to be operating in the Pacific the way that they need to. We have a conditional event segment where if there's a supplied U.S. ground unit occupying an Axis strategic hex, an Axis meaning a gray one, on the board, then the U.S. will get an additional step. We certainly want that. We can't afford to not be accruing steps regularly as the U.S. to keep the drive going and to supplement for losses. So that definitely puts into clarity the need to grab. Well, that's an allied strategic hex. So yeah, that puts more importance on grabbing Saipan and Guam ASAP, so that we get that extra step at the end of the turn. We can still work to get Rabaul. We can still work to get maybe Truck, maybe other places. Um, but that's what we need to do. So that's it for the Operation Forger. It is a blitz. We will get one blitz marker. So you can imagine. I mean, just based on the geography here, we're going to be doing naval invasions. We have to put our blitz marker with our naval invasion beachhead wherever we're going to go with that. So it makes sense. There's almost certainly going to be some kind of big naval battle here because the Allies are going to want to send basically put a flotilla at Saipan for a CV strike, and the Japanese are going to need to contest that. They're just going to have to do that. So kind of a preview of what to expect here. Now, the next card, the card that will be played face down, is Operation King, which will be our fall card. This is again a blitz card. We can see U.S. forces land in the Philippines. So ideally, what should happen is we take that island chain there, right, Guam and Saipan. That gives us access to the Philippine Sea. We set up, and then we begin to again be cutting straight west to relieve and open things up in the Philippines. You can see there's a few other things that we'll get across the way. There'll be some minor country politics and so on and so forth. I can see a variety of different things. Colonial liberation, I suspect that will help us with getting the Philippines back on the board. We'll look more closely at that when the time comes. So a pretty straightforward selection. It makes total sense. I see no reason to adjust the card play. Not that I could pick a better card, but that seems straightforward from here. So we're going to go. I'm going to take care of all that logistical stuff. So getting these units where they need to go, dealing with the replacements and what that's going to look like, and then we will have a naval construction segment. I'll have to double check that. I'm not sure that there's much that's going to happen there. And then we'll roll through the rest of the political events stuff. The support segment, I don't know. This is going to really come down to like, what am I going to bother to show? I think what I'll do is I'll cut here. I'll play through up until we get to a significant event, and we'll start to show that. Just as a preview to that, I suspect what we're going to be doing here is we're going to deploy some support markers towards Guam and Saipan, which should and will probably generate some kind of naval combat. And we'll talk through kind of the beginning bits of that, and maybe we'll play some of that on the battle board. That's the obvious thing that's going to happen. That's the next thing to expect. So let me get through some of that stuff, and maybe we'll see a great big ship battle here in Axis Empires. Okay, we just had some important stuff go down. Well, one, I had to make a couple of small corrections to the way I had my raid fleet over here, where we needed to make sure our carriers were escorted, and they were. And I forgot to put them in the used box, so we did that. The Americans on their go did their own strike base attack on Saipan itself, which had 2 air units stationed there. And we did the base attack. We did it with a pretty sizable force. Our intelligence die roll was pretty good. So we had a 5 plus 1 is 6. So we sent three carriers and cruiser escort.
I'm gonna have to double check the. I think I made the flotilla right. Um, but they went and attacked Saipan, which had the two air units on it. There's no response. There's no support marker. It's a pot shot. Well, I rolled a 1 on the raid, which meant we got 2 combat rounds, which meant that we were basically chucking 28 dice at the air units. Now the thing is, you need 3 hits on a land-based air from carriers to inflict a true hit. But across 2 rounds, the carriers managed to score 4 hits on each. This was lucky; they needed 6s, so the luck was on the American side. We did 4 hits to each plane, which round down to 1 based on that land-based air compared to carrier. So each one basically had 1 die of damage, and it was enough to destroy these guys. I rolled a 5, exactly what was needed, and then I rolled a 4, exactly what was needed. And both of those LBA are destroyed and go to the delay box. So we have a sizable amount of American units that now go into the use box of the Marianas. But that has kind of opened the door now to put Saipan under direct threat. It's going to be much harder at this point to aid Saipan at this point, because as I look around, like, what air bases are 3 hexes from Saipan? Well, can't count that. There's no detachment marker there. I might have to double check, but it's a dependent, so we would need a detachment marker or something here to use. And that would only protect Guam. If we attack Saipan directly, there's not within 3 hexes an airbase to send these guys or any other defending air at this point. These guys are supposed to be here. That's my bad. A little bit chaotic here, guys. But generally speaking, the air cover over Saipan has been cleared. This was kind of an unlikely result. I was expecting to maybe get rid of one, get lucky and get rid of one air unit, but we're managing to get rid of a lot. So I think the attack on Saipan is going to go reasonably well. We're still at the early part of the support marker segment. I did the base attack first just to see like what can happen. And now things are lining up very nicely. So we're going to construct our probably carrier, I would think a carrier strike task force, uh, and go for Saipan itself to prepare for landings. And we've got to work through that. So I'm going to take care of that. But if we get to the like, okay, here's a big naval battle, we'll switch the camera view to the battle board and we'll start talking about the big fight. Okay, a couple of things I'm going to throw out there. There was some air combat down here due to placement of Air Force markers that the Japanese actually kind of won. I probably should have showed this on camera, but there was a land-based air combat above Rabaul that the Japanese were unwilling to commit any carrier forces to due to their small number of carrier forces they have to work with. But essentially, the Japanese kind of came away better. They managed to destroy an American land-based air. A few others went to the used assets box, which we will eventually recycle back. But not a bad result for the Japanese, given they just lost 2 LBAs. Now they got a damaged one, a full strength one that were based in Rabaul, that are in the used assets box, and then again the Americans lost one. But the preponderance of support markers allowed the British to use their singular one here, just at the bottom of the camera view, to place their Air Force marker. Now, I the alternative was to use this in the Burma theater, but I think I'd like to get a really good start in the Pacific, and so we've managed to place an Air Force marker that was not contested by the Japanese, in some part because there's not. Um, well, actually, you know what? That's not true. Actually, that's not true. There should be a fight. There should be a fight between these guys. He's actually in the range from here to operate, but this would be our last. Our last air. So how do we do this? Well, just to display this land-based air versus land-based air once again. What it is, it's a roll-off. Now, because we don't have carriers, hits are true hits, but land-based air really only get hit on sixes. You can see this in the combat charts for, uh, well, all this stuff. Um, but it's in the book. So uh, basically, we'll do 3 dice and 3 dice, easy enough just to roll this. The British miss, the Japanese actually get a hit, and oh gosh. Okay, so this guy is damaged. Do we go another round? Well, yeah, I think we should. We should try. So the British go again with 1 die, they miss, and the Japanese go get another hit. Oh god. And oh yeah, these guys are destroyed. All right. So used assets box and their Japanese remaining air marker go to the delay box. All right, that's my bad for not realizing I had more planes in play. Now it's a different sort of situation now because if I want to put air cover over a ball to increase the chances that we'll take it, we now, as the Western forces, would have to commit more of our carrier units, and I'm not sure that we want to do that right now. So we might just hold off. But the next support marker placement that we're going to do is going to be for Saipan. So we have a marker here. The reason why we used our air forces that way is that it's hard to get air all the way out to Saipan from any of the bases nearby. We're not within 3 hexes, so it's very isolated. To hit Saipan, we are going to have to use a carrier fleet, and we're going to do that now. So I want to start to show this in slow-mo. This is going to add time to the video series, but I think this is the situation where you want to show off, you want to showcase the mechanics. So the Allies are certainly going to be using a carrier fleet. We'll use Task Force 17 and say, hey, we're gonna go here so that if we win, we're going to make this a CV strike marker on top of Saipan. That's how we would do this. So we're going to do that. And now what we need to do is we need to make a task force. Now, if you follow the order of play, and this is in the Schiffskrieg book, we're going to declare its intention to place a support marker and indicate where the placement will occur. The phasing faction must create a task force to represent the support unit being placed and reveal its composition. Then the non-phasing player, the Japanese, decides whether or not they're going to contest it. So it could be that the Americans go, big hog in deploying, and the Japanese just decide not to contest it. Which, I mean, I don't know that we're going to have that happen, but we'll see. So to do this, we're going to roll a die, and we're going to add 6 to it. That's going to tell us how many ships can be in. And this is actually a really important die roll. If we roll low as the Americans and the Japanese roll high, this could come to hurt us in our efforts to take Saipan. So the American die roll, I roll a 1. So the worst possible result that I could get, I'm only going to get a 7. But I still have to commit a carrier. So there's bullet point rules in the rulebook about how big a task force can be and what it can be comprised of. We're going to have to include at least 1 carrier, but there's a limit to how many heavy ships we can include. Basically, I mean, not to restate all the rules, you can check the rulebook, the PDF's available online. I basically have a limit to how much I can send, and I have to make sure that I'm escorting that force. So if you figure I can have 7 ships in this task force, a couple of those are going to be carriers, and then many others are going to have to be escorts. So I'm going to have limited firepower. If the Japanese decide to contest, and I think that they will, it could be they roll high and they send a lot more forces, and that's going to heavily tip the balance here. So let me work out what I'm going to do with these 7 units, and then we'll continue this narrative here for a sea battle near Saipan. Okay, so I have 3 American aircraft carriers, a battleship, and 3 cruisers selected as our 7-ship task force for striking Saipan. In response, the Japanese will use a surface fleet marker to contest. So when we look at the uh, placement rules, you can contest a CV fleet placement with a surface fleet, and you can include aircraft carriers in a surface fleet. So, is there a reason why I didn't use a CV fleet? Well, if there was a CV, if we had let the Americans turn this into a CV strike marker, then we could use our own carrier fleet to put a strike out and contest that strike placement. But um, I think the thing is we want to intercept the fleet before it gets to Saipan is the idea. And we can save our, because the Japanese only have one CV fleet support marker, we can reserve that for a counterstrike potentially. And we have more surface fleets than carrier fleets. So it makes sense to do this, but we can still include carriers in our strike force, even if we would rather it be a night action. And these naval combats, if you're not clear with the rules, can be day or night. If it's night, then carriers and planes don't fire, just ships do. So it could be, maybe the Japanese try to get the jump on the Americans with a night combat, and because the task force of the Americans is so low, that actually could give us a really great advantage. But the first thing we need to do is determine our task force speed. Um, so we're going to roll a die, and we're going to see what the Japanese get. Now, if we roll a 1, like the Americans did, then it'll be a mano a mano kind of fight. But if the Japanese can get a high number, this could actually be a really important victory for the Japanese. We roll the die, and I also roll a 1. Okay, well, I was hoping as the Japanese to get more, so we need to pick our own setup here, and boy, this is going to be tricky. I think we're going to likewise we're going to have this be a very similar setup here. So we're going to send 3 carriers. We're going to send a battleship and 3 cruisers. I'm going to move us to the battle board view here in a second, but just so you can see that we're going to contest with a surface ship. We can still include carriers. So, what are the task force rules here? Because that's really what matters. A task force representing a surface fleet cannot contain more carriers than surface ships, and that's fine. Cannot have more than 6 heavy ships, that's fine. And cannot have any CD ships, well, that's fine. And we could chip in uh, a subfleet, which the Americans decided not to do, and we can do this as a bonus. So we could stick those guys in, and I think now might be a good time for the Japanese to try it. If they can knock out some American carriers, that would just be the bee's knees. And if it does end up being a night combat, the subs can fire on an aircraft carrier regardless. So I think now is a good time to try to make something happen. And so we could probably handle a couple of things right now just on the next steps without transitioning to the battle board. So the very next thing that we're going to end up doing here is so we've created the task force. We've we need to make speed checks, but if I look at the board here, only 2 of the Japanese units need to make speed checks, and that is the Junio and the Haruna don't have a speed 6. So everybody else would be a guaranteed uh, arrival there. So we got to do speed checks. Let's do that. Um, here we go. So let's see. Ship used to constitute a task force being placed in an all-sea hex must meet, yeah, it is based in a port hex within the naval zone. That's not the case. It is based in a port hex adjacent to the naval zone uh, where the support unit is being placed, and it can trace a fleet path between the 2 naval zones and it passes a speed check. So we do need these guys to pass their speed check. Um, so we're going to roll a die for each ship, and it needs to be less than or equal to the speed factor. So we'll do the Haruna, and Haruna is good. And for um, the carrier is good. So both rolled under 5 and a 4 respectively. You can see there. So they passed their speed checks. Um, and so everybody that wanted to be in it is now in it. So now we're going to determine if it's a day or night action. Well, if I compare the air capabilities of both sides, and it's going to be hard to compare them because I have the Americans already on the battle board. I can already tell you that generally the air complement of the Japanese is going to be weaker than the Americans. And so I think in this case, the Japanese would like a night action, the Americans would like a day action. So at the start of each combat round, we need to determine this. So where there's going to be a die roll. +1 is selecting a day action, and then +1 if there's at least one friendly air base within 3 hexes of the battle location, provided the battle is taking place in an all sea hex, which, as it happens here, that's true for the Japanese. There's one friendly air base, because technically there's an air base as a part of Saipan itself. So that would be a part of it. So they each have a +1. So technically this is an even die roll. We'll roll for the Americans first since they're taking their action. So rolling a die +1. Oh, they got a 6. So +1 is 7. So now the Japanese need to hope to roll a 6, and they roll a 1. So they lose this out. So this is going to be a day action, which means the carriers are the most important part of the puzzle. So let's switch gears, switch views to the battle board, and let's fight this sucker out. Okay, so here we are lined up on the battle board for combat. I've got things sort of oriented for the active player, which is the Americans. And you can see how things have lined up here. So kind of I guess, ship to ship, it's, kind of even one-on-one, except for the tossing in of the torpedo boat, which could be the I boat, which could be a big difference maker. We'll see. A couple of things. So, like, the American air and battleships are all generally better than their Japanese counterparts. The Japanese cruisers are a bit better than the American cruisers, and again, that torpedo boat. So this is actually kind of interesting. I think the Allies were kind of worried because they got their low intelligence roll. The Japanese could make this even trickier if they had rolled better. Like, imagine we rolled a 6, and we would have had 12 ships, nearly double, and that would have been really bad for the Americans. We could have expected many American units to get banged up. But here we have what we have. So the way this is going to work, because it's a day action, the only units that are going to fire are going to be the aircraft units from the aircraft carriers and the torpedo boat. And I'm just going to say, because you can add up all your numbers and then divide them up for the aircraft. So we have 3, 4, and 4, so 11. The Japanese could kind of divvy that up however which way they wanted along here. Same thing with the Americans. They could divvy up the 14 across all these guys. But I think the important thing for both sides, like, this is useful. The Americans would like to get a carrier strike on the island, but they wouldn't mind knocking out the rest of the Japanese carrier forces. I mean, there's still a few in reserve, but now would be a great time to achieve a great victory. So what we're going to do, just to make this easy on a game basis, Yorktown's going to fire on the Junio. The Wasp is going to fire on Zuikaku. Saratoga is going to fire on the Shokaku. And just to show the Japanese response, the Japanese are going to do a very similar thing. They're going to target these carriers, and they're going to double up the torpedoes, who have to use all of their torpedo factors against the same target. It'll functionally mean 5 dice on the Yorktown 2 here. So we're going to do the Americans first. So what we'll do is 5 dice on the Junio. So I'm going to roll, I guess, 3 at a time. So I've got 3 dice in my hand. We have 1 hit. And We'll roll 2 more, and that's another hit. So 2 hits on the Junio. Not good. Oh gosh. So now we're gonna do. I'm just gonna do the damage right away because to me this is worthwhile. We're gonna roll 1 die for each hit, so 2 hits, and we're gonna add the damage together. Okay, one was a cock die. Okay, 5. So total damage of 5 on the Junio is going to lead this poor guy to being sunk and destroyed. So we'll put him up here in the sunk destroyed. He's still going to get to fire his dice, but there goes a Japanese carrier. Boom. Wasp on the Zukaku. 5 dice. 3 hits. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, just so you guys can see it. 3 6s. I wish I was rolling a D&D character. So that's 3 hits, 2 more misses, but 3 hits altogether. Okay, there goes Zuikaku. Sunk. And Saratoga on the Shikaku. 4 dice, 3 at a time here. Misses, and then 1 more is a miss. So that's it for the Americans. I'd say the Americans came away pretty good. They just sunk 2 Japanese aircraft carriers. Boom. Just like that. Um, uh, so I'll keep this arrangement here so we can see. So we're going to have 5 on Yorktown. That is a disable result, so we'll keep that in mind. 2 more dice, and that's a hit. And the hit does 6. So the Yorktown is sunk. Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, that's good. That's. I mean, an equal exchange is not great, but we'll take it. Then we'll have 4 dice on the Wasp. 2 hits and a disable with the 4th die being 2 disables, so 2 hits. 5. The Wasp is sunk. Oh goodness. Oh goodness, guys. 4 dice on the Saratoga. That's a hit and a disable, and another disable, and the hit does 5. The Saratoga is sunk. Oh my goodness gracious, guys. Wow. Wowie wow. Wow. All right. Well, and these guys aren't sunk. He's just used. So just keep that in mind. So we're gonna send him to the used box basically. And okay, here's the situation here. The Americans just had a incredibly bloody air battle. They just lost 3 aircraft carriers. The 3 aircraft carriers they sent on the attack were all destroyed. Um, every single one of them. Which these dice are rolling hot, by the way. Just banging dice today, super banging dice. So that was catastrophic. So the question is, do you stick around? Well, let's say that this is going to be done. So we'll just set it over here for the moment. If you were to line those guys up to go again, what would happen? Well, if it's a day action, and at this point, I think the Japanese would be happy to make it a day action. They would have the advantage. We would likely get a day action. It'd be a +2 to the die roll. If the Americans wanted a night action, it would be tough to beat the Japanese roll. The Japanese could get the air. They'd get 4 dice against these guys. They could basically pick something and very likely get to destroy it. If it were a night action, if you look at the dice comparisons, the Japanese still kind of have the advantage. So I think I look at this situation and go, I think the Americans need to probably call it off and say, okay, well, so much for that. We need to go home. This was a badly planned operation. We didn't have good intelligence. The Japanese, in the tactical uh, chaos, have lost some carriers, but the Americans have lost a lot too. So this is like revenge for Midway, but a terribly costly one. And ultimately, this hurts the Japanese more than it hurts the Americans. But losing 3 carriers is, well, it ain't good. So I think in terms of the battle, I think the Americans are going to say after one round that they're done. Or well, I mean, if they were to call it quits now, I guess this wasn't a major victory, and this probably wouldn't even be a limited victory. Uh, so yeah, I think the Americans can safely say that they give up and they're going to pull back. They're going to pull away. There won't be a second. Um, I don't think there'll be a second combat. I don't see a case where the Americans really get anywhere, because even if they were to go a second round and win it, um, unless we manage to destroy everything, and mathematically that's not possible. There's no way to get a victory such that our CV marker gets to stay on the board. So if we're going to invade Saipan, we're going to do it without air cover at this point on this turn, and we'll call it quits. So let me get this rearranged back onto the strategic map here, away from the battle board. But first major naval engagement of this 1944 campaign is a Japanese victory, though a Pyrrhic victory, certainly. Okay, returning to back where we were, a failed marker placement on the part of the Americans. A shame, really, but if you figure it at from the American Admiralty Center, Admiralty office, you'd be looking at it going, well, that's a damn shame. We lost 3 aircraft carriers, but we keep fighting battles like that. The Japanese aren't going to have a navy, and we still have strategic reserves of American ships that can be used to continue to pressure the Japanese. So I think if you scratch 2 aircraft carriers off the Japanese list, they don't have that many. Let's do it again. There's nothing to stop us from doing it again. Let's do it. So the carrier fleet of the Americans going for it once more, Task Force 11 this time. And we will roll our dice for intelligence, which will determine how big our task force is going to be. So we're hoping for a decent roll. We get a 6 this time, so we can have a fleet as big as 12. And I think from our perspective, we don't even know that we have that many that we'd want to send. Let's see, out that far. Yeah, boy, we don't have the biggest set of units to send here, but I think, let's see. Well, I guess we should look at what the Japanese could respond with. That might be the bigger indicator. Japanese still have 3 aircraft carriers left in their main fleet, and that's really it. There are some reserve. There's a reserve aircraft carrier in the home islands, so we would have to deal with, in terms of real air combat, 3 aircraft carriers. Could we fend them off? Well, we've got 2 light aircraft carriers out of our service squadron. That would maybe not be ideal. We could send some from Guadalcanal, where these guys are based. It would require a speed check, but if we sent, let's see. Well, this is going to be the tricky thing. All right, maybe I need to stop and think about this for a second, because what I don't want to do is send a force that gets chewed up by the Japanese. We may be able to send 12, but we don't have 12 necessarily just all sitting together. So let me think this through. What I may just do is skip ahead. If there's going to be a big battle board situation, we'll skip ahead to that. Um, because what the Japanese decide to send will be up to what that task force of the Americans looks like. Again, up to 12. So we can send kind of whatever we want within the speed. We've already spent a lot of our forces based over here on those initial activities, both the raids and the initial fleet battle. And now it's just what can we really gather to send again? So I need to figure that out. Okay, so quickly I want to show we we were going to have a second naval fight, but the Japanese looked at the situation and said, "We are." After seeing what the Americans put together, and we put up a sizable fleet to go and do a CV strike, we decided, okay, that's going to put all these American ships in the used box. There's tons of ships in the used box of the Marianas. We're going to let them have it. And so, yes, the Americans successfully placed a CV strike marker. All the ships that were in the American task force that were ready to fight if they had to now go to the used box, which starts to deplete the available American ships. So when we start looking at, um, the next move, the Americans don't have quite as many to use on the next phase. So, okay, we've got a CV strike over Saipan here. So far, so good. That's going to reduce the capability of the Japanese to send reinforcements into Saipan. It also means that there will be a column shift for the Americans, which is all very, very important. The very next thing that the Americans need to do here before they do any of their operational movement um, is to decide: are we going to do any more placements? And yeah, we're certainly going to need to do that. We do need to get the beachhead marker set up so we can actually get into Saipan. So, despite all that craziness of what we've deployed, we now need to put down a surface fleet marker to perform the action that we need to perform. So, we look at that and we say, okay, well, now we're going to use one of our surface fleets to do the beachhead. And again, this is one of those things like, okay, well, now we're gonna stick our surface fleet there, and we're gonna need to decide what else to do there. We also want to keep in mind that we want to have surface fleets to increase our troop capacity, to increase the number of troops that are going to be in the beachhead to land at Saipan. So we can't spend all of our surface markers trying to do this, but we are going to try to make a landing, and we need to invest again, yes, uh, more forces at play here. So um, the other thing that we could try to do um, is well, no, I guess I landing at Guam or Saipan doesn't matter. We're just going to land on Saipan. I think that's the most important thing. We can worry about Guam later on. We certainly don't want to leave Guam occupied by the Japanese, but I think we make the landing at Saipan. So we got to do the surface fleet. Same story here, right? We need to construct our surface fleet, and we need to make that a placement. So we're placing our surface fleet here. We're going to roll intelligence for our task force, and we rolled a 5 plus 6 is 11. So we can send whatever it is we really want in here. Now, what we can do is we can throw in, and I tried looking in the rules for this. I believe so long as you have the fleet path, um, you can create a task force from forces in separate ports. I really tried to look in the rules, guys, to see if that's not allowed and like your task force has to come from the same port, but I couldn't find it. I tried searching with Control F in the PDF to like try to find the phrase that would say they all have to come from the same port, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. I don't know. So what we would be doing here is we would be selecting a batch of battleships, light carrier, and so on. Um, and we would uh, basically be sending these in. Trying to see what else we would include. I mean, I guess we'd just include. We should include the battleship as well. Battleship, a light carrier. If I'm able to include forces from another port, I would maybe include, um, maybe one more aircraft carrier, and that would probably be it. Which this would be one, two, three, four, five. Yeah, I mean this is all good. And we don't have more carriers than surface ships, so we'd probably send this allotment here, which is not bad. Some air cover and some powerful battleships to help uh, at play. And so now the Japanese have to decide, do they stop the landings at Saipan? I think they kind of have to, right? So here's where we would probably spend a surface fleet and say, we are going to try to contest this. We got to try. You got to try to make something happen and stop this. And the Japanese task force die roll, oops, is also 11. And boy, would they just send it? They probably don't want to send everything. Um, so let's see. They can send as much as they can handle, maybe, knowing that they might still have to face off and do it again in the not too distant future. Really looking tough here. So let's get this onto the battle boards. This is the surface combat that's going to determine whether or not the Allies get their landing uh, in Saipan. Okay, so this is the lineup. I think the Japanese are probably advantaged here a little bit. Um, and then the question is, do we do a night or a day? Well, just based on the numbers, I'd probably say that the Japanese would want a night combat, honestly. And I don't know. The Americans, maybe air, right? Knock out the rest of these aircraft carriers if we can. That would be ideal. So maybe the Allies want a day mission here. So we'll have to roll off and see who gets it. American roll. They got the 6+1 again, so it's very likely going to be a day. But no, the Japanese also rolled a 6, and they get a +1 for having an air base nearby. Um, so yeah, and then that would be Guam, not actually Saipan due to the CV strike marker on um, Saipan. So okay, so then it actually is going to be a surface combat, which is kind of interesting. So just to keep in mind for the surface combat, the carriers aren't going to be able to be targets until all ships have been removed otherwise. Or the way it really works is you would say, we're putting attacks on these guys, but they only hit and work if the rest of these ships have been removed from combat. So it's almost like you don't probably not even worth bothering for the Japanese to try to hit these guys. And likewise, doesn't make sense for the Americans to try to hit the Japanese. You're better off trying to wear away the escorts at this point. So the Americans having and this is different than aircraft units where the aircraft on the carriers you can distribute points however you want. Here it's just we're going to aim and fire each ship to ship. So you figure out, well, let's knock out some of these Japanese cruisers. I'm sorry, battleships, and then let's knock out a cruiser, right? It's kind of how I want to shape this up. So if we did that, 5 dice on the Hyuga, all misses, 2 more dice, misses. So he's done. 4 on the Congo. That's a disable result plus, yeah, so that is a disable, place the target ship in the disabled box. So he'll eventually be in the disabled box, but we'll hold there for a second. I'm sorry, not him, the Congo. Okay, we have 4 on the Musashi. That's 1 hit. 2 hits. And the Musashi is going to be sunk. And then 4 on the Mogami. Miss. Miss. All right. And then we're going to fire back now. I guess I need to figure out a better way to track this. But there'll be 4 on the South Dakota. There'll be 4 on the Pennsylvania. There'll be 6 on the Idaho. And what we'll do is we'll have all 3 of these cruisers attack the Tennessee, is how we'll do this. Just make it easy. So 4 South Dakota. That's a disable and a hit. 2 disables and a hit. And the hit is 2, which is actually not enough to damage it. But this guy will be in the disabled box. And with the Hyuga done, I guess they're just done. 4 on the Pennsylvania. All misses, so this guy goes into the disabled box. And then we had 6 on the Idaho before the Musashi is sunk. That's a hit. 2 more hits. Oh gosh. All right, so 3 hits total on the Idaho. And the Idaho is sunk. And then we're going to have 6 dice on the Tennessee. Misses. A hit and a disable. And actually not enough to damage the Tennessee, but they do go to the disabled box. So now, now things are looking a bit iffy. I think the Japanese have probably come away with this one, and we're gonna have boy. I don't think the Americans want to stick around. Their best bet would be to get air advantage, and they'd have to hope to heavily defeat the Japanese. I don't think that's going to happen. So, our disabled ships are going to go to the naval warfare box. The sunk ships are sunk, and we're going to send these guys away. The first landing ship battle to get landings at Saipan have failed. The Americans are going to have to try again with a different task force. But you can imagine right now, this is just some of the biggest naval battles in the Pacific War right now being conducted off the coast of Saipan. Carrier strikes, but then a full-on carrier brawl followed by additional ships duking it out and wearing themselves thin. So let me get us back to the map. Okay, so returning to the map, I just want to show there's a beachhead marker off camera here. The Americans threw 1 more surface fleet. Just look at the pile of used right here, ridiculous. And the Japanese decided not to contest it. The Japanese, all they have left on the board in terms of naval units are a handful of ships, and would almost certainly have been defeated by the Americans. And the Americans could have entertained at least maybe 1 more throw of the dice to basically have unrestricted capability on the board. So kind of all worn pretty thin, all things considered. But basically just let them have it. If for some reason they tried, what could have happened is the Japanese would have gotten lucky to force the marker removal. But the American force basically would have had a really good chance of eliminating the Japanese units and then still winning the contest and getting to place their marker and finishing off the Japanese fleet. So the Japanese just said, fine, we did the best we could, and now there's a beachhead marker. We also used uh, some of our air units that are based out of Einwitok to do a troop convoy here. So we have our beachhead against Saipan. We have the CV strike marker over it. We also have some addition. We have a regular troop convoy here. We also have an escort troop convoy to increase the sea lift capability. Now, we could potentially try to do some more of that, um, but I'm kind of running out of ships to use for that purpose. So we're going to have to just let that be. Uh, we'd have to get I guess, a speed check to get um, any more units out there, and I just don't see it happening at this point. So I think what this turn has taught me is be careful over committing units, because if you use too many units, even with a high intelligence die roll, you may not have units left over to continue to do operations with other support markers. So there's a little bit of a game there to figure out, like, how deep do you go, how big do you go. The Americans have a lot more to play with, but if they slam in a bunch of units, they're going to eventually peter out because all the other ships have been on station performing operations. So as it happens, we're going to be able to transport two units, two single step units into the beachhead to attack um, uh, where we need to. Um, and sorry, there's supposed to be a supply marker here as well. So that's my bad. Troop convoy, supply convoy, and um, we will be able to get through here. Now, I could still look at potentially some other support marker placements. We're starting to run a bit thin on units to use. Um, Technically, the Commonwealth still have a surface fleet that they could use to do something with. Though at the moment, I don't think there's much that they can do. Um, there's only one Western Allied beachhead marker, so they've kind of dedicated as much of their forces as they could to support what they could support. We could maybe try to open up a beachhead marker somehow, but there's not very many good places for the Commonwealth to use it, um, even right now. So kind of a tricky situation for them to be stuck in, um, as we're looking at all this. So um, anyway, let's see, where am I at here? Other sport markers. I do need to look at the logistics marker because I should have placed that earlier, I think. So the main thing is, as we look at operational movement, and there's going to have to be a whole bunch off camera, guys, because we've got stuff in India that we need to look at. We need to look at China. We do need to look at around here near Rabaul. There's things that we can do there. And then obviously we're going to have things for Saipan to kind of complete the thought on Saipan. Is, one, we do have our blitz marker here, right? That's in place for this. We're going to be transporting one Marine unit, transporting them from the Panama Canal box through the Southeast Pacific, through Micronesia, through Marianas to the beachhead, and then similarly transporting this Marine unit from Iwitok to the beachhead. So we have two Marine units The Marine units will provide a shift in combat, so we're going to have a couple different shifts involved here, and that should help us make something happen. This is a strong fortress here. That's going to pose a problem for us. But I think we're using just about every bonus that we can get our hands on for the moment to make this work. And it could be that we're going to have to continue to funnel reinforcements in here, and we'll certainly be able to do that. When we get to reserve movement, we'll probably transport some additional uh, steps from these locations. I think there's a couple other good spots for me to pull from. We'll want to pull some additional units into the beachhead to continue to make progress there. But that's kind of where we're headed. Um, so let me take care of all that other operational movement. But you can see we're piling up the Marines for Saipan, and we'll go from there. Okay, so here we are. I'm just going to wrap up this video. We're going to have to hit the Soviet part of the faction turn in the next video because I think this is super long already. A couple of things. We did some attacking over here to try to clear this port city over yonder and managed to cause a step loss to um, the Japanese there. Rabaul is going to be a tough nut to crack. We're going to need good support deployed to make a difference there, and we're just not there yet. Um, so then we're going to have uh, in the west, we're doing shaping operations to get ready. The Chinese did have some success in capturing Hanoi and Indochina. I don't think that really does a whole lot for us yet, but it's just nice to make some progress against the Japanese. In China, generally not looking like we have much offensive capability right now, so I'm really not banking on doing anything there, at least for a little while. There's probably one place I should consider attacking, which is right up in here. We could maybe get away with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's just not a lot of options. We don't want any clear breakthroughs either way. I think we're happy to let some things attrit for a while until the Japanese pressure is too much to handle, or we make a breakthrough in Burma. Um, we did take Saipan though. That's kind of the main kind of takeaway here, with some lucky die rolls of a 1 and then a 2, where we were able to uh, clear the way. Our Marines, we lost one of our Marine units, but we otherwise were able to get in, and uh, or not a 1 and a 2, I forget, whatever it was. I took a step loss on the first combat, but so did the defenders, and then they were down to 1 step, and the Marines had the advantage. We got a 2 to 1. I rolled a 2. We cleared the hex. We captured Saipan. We're basically knocking down their control a bit once more, so their lead shrinks further, and now we're looking at more like a +4 for Axis Tide, which is gonna help. But being in Saipan gave us some benefits. So in the reserve movement, we shipped another American Corps in there to hold Saipan. We're going to be solidly in control of it. And then, in addition to that, because we satisfy the conditional event segment on our Operation Forager card, we put a step in Papua down here because we do have a logistics marker in Port Moresby. So we put a step in there. That's just going to help support the push on Rabaul. I do think we need to take Rabaul so that we've taken Saipan on the first turn. It bloody naval fighting to get there, but we did it. So I want to use the rest of this season to look at where we can make gains in Rabaul, kind of break that area, and start looking at where can we hit next. Do we try to get into the Western Caroline Islands? Do we maybe try to swing around and get Truck just because we can? Um, it's going to depend on a lot of factors here that aren't totally clear yet, and where we're going to invest our resources and time.
that all remains to be seen as we get ready here to go. So more to come. We're going to do the Soviet turn next. I don't think there's going to be much for them to do, but we're going to do that in another video and then get into turn two proper as things continue to play out. The fact that we got Saipan as easily as we did, it's funny. It's like the low rolls compared to all the high rolls during naval combat. That is a big benefit to the U.S. They've got now some time to work with um, to reclaim their beachhead marker, look somewhere else. Can we even push on Iwo Jima? Have we broken the Japanese fleet to the degree that we can make progress? All that and more. We'll see you in the next one, guys. Sorry for the long gap before we could do another video here. A very long gap, but we're there, and we'll be able to hit more. I hope in the near future and bang through these turns, ideally pretty quickly. I hope so. Yeah. See you in the next one, guys. Take care. Keep gaming.